The posters appeared before sunrise. Lyon, 1942, a city carved into shadows by occupation, woke to the face of a woman sketched in harsh, hurried strokes. Sharp features, determined eyes, shoulder-length hair, and one detail circled again and again by a German officer's red pencil: a wooden leg. Across the city, whispers spread faster than the morning light. The Gestapo had issued an order. The woman in the drawing was now considered the most dangerous operative in the Allied network. No military rank, no uniform, no official authority. Yet they believed she had the potential to unravel their occupation from within. They called her the Limping Lady, imagining she would be slowed by the wooden limb she had carried since a hunting accident. But the truth was already slipping far beyond their grasp. While they searched train stations and alleyways for her limp, she was building something beneath their boots. A resistance structure unlike anything France had seen. It moved quietly, silently, and without her name ever appearing on a single document. And if this sounds like the moment a legendary spy steps into history, stay with me. Because the path that brought her here began with an accident so violent that it nearly ended her life before her espionage career even started. And the truth of what happened is far darker and far more relentless than the heroic stories most people hear. My name is Michael Graves, and in the world I speak from, names rarely reveal the whole story. Before my father's mind slipped into fog, before memory began erasing the edges of his life, he handed me a small leather-bound diary. Its spine was cracked, and its pages carried ink that had faded into deep brown shadows. But the weight of what it contained never faded. My father worked in intelligence for 25 years, deep inside rooms with no windows, rooms where conversations were never recorded, where every sentence could alter the fate of people whose names you might never know. He had worked alongside officers who shaped the world from corridors of wars that officially did not exist. Some became heroes, some disappeared, some were betrayed by their own governments. But there was one name he underlined twice, one name he told me represented the highest price courage could demand. Virginia Hall. The Americans respected her, the British trusted her, the Nazis feared her, and the Gestapo hunted her as if she were an entire army. Today, I am opening that page exactly as my father wrote it, because stories like hers were never meant to stay locked in a drawer where no one would see them again. Before we continue, subscribe if you want more stories pulled from the rooms where history was never meant to be recorded. And write in the comments, God bless America, to honor the men and women whose courage shaped the world in ways most people will never fully understand. Now let us step into the part of her story that few people ever hear, the part where a single moment of bad luck transformed an ordinary woman into the most hunted operative in Europe. Virginia Hall did not grow up in a world of shadows. She was raised in Baltimore in a comfortable home where her mother imagined a life of elegance for her, wealthy suitors, a polite marriage, nothing more dangerous than a charity gala. But Virginia's eyes were always fixed on something beyond those bright expectations. She wanted languages, independence, travel, and the kind of liberty young women in the 1920s were expected to politely decline. She studied in New York. She lived in Paris. She trained in Vienna. She dreamed of becoming an ambassador, even though the State Department made it clear that women were not welcome in that role. Still, she pushed forward. She refused to shrink herself to fit a life others designed for her. But destiny does not always reward determination. Sometimes it destroys it first, and her turning point arrived on a hunting trip in Turkey, when a single slip changed the trajectory of her life forever. She was crossing wetlands with friends, her shotgun balanced casually in her hands. It was a weapon her father had gifted her. She knew it well, which is often when accidents happen. A wire fence cut across the marsh, and she climbed it without engaging the safety. Her foot slipped on wet wood. The gun fell. She tried to catch it, and the blast followed. a brutal sound that echoed across the reeds. She collapsed instantly, blood pouring into the earth. Her friends carried her to the nearest hospital, pressing their jackets against the wound, desperately trying to stop the bleeding. For 3 weeks, the doctors believed she would recover, but infection crept in like an invisible enemy. There were no antibiotics, no miracle cure. Her only chance was amputation. So on Christmas Day 1933, Virginia Hall woke to discover that her left leg was gone from the knee down. Her despair was not from the pain, though the pain was immense. It came from the crushing realization that her dream of becoming a diplomat had become impossible. Disabled women were not hired. Disabled diplomats were unthinkable. She lay in bed believing her future had been reduced to the quiet, safe life her mother wanted. But some people are built from something that only appears when everything is taken from them. As infection threatened her life again, she remembered a vision of her father urging her to continue. She fought, inch by inch, breath by breath, and when she was strong enough to stand, she was fitted with a heavy wooden prosthetic she would later name Cuthbert. It tore her skin. It bled in cold weather. Every step was a battle. But she forced herself to walk, then to climb stairs, then to live again. What seemed like an ending became the beginning of something far more dangerous. Her wound did not weaken her. It sharpened her. It hardened her into someone the Germans would never suspect years later. Because when the Gestapo searched for spies, they never imagined the mastermind would be a woman with a wooden leg. She returned to work at the American consulate in Venice. She applied again to become an ambassador, rejected again, this time because of her disability. When she was transferred to a rising fascist state in the Baltics, she realized something devastating. She had given the State Department everything, and they would never see her as anything but a clerk. That disappointment could have ended her story. Instead, it placed her on the train that carried her into the first chapter of her life as a spy. She resigned. She remained in Tallinn as war swept across Europe. Hitler invaded Poland. Nations fell, bombs fell. And in the chaos, she chose movement over safety. She boarded a ship to London, determined to help the fight against fascism however she could. But no branch of the British military would take her, not as a woman, not as an amputee, not as an American from a neutral country. Most people would have stopped there. But destiny was waiting, and she walked straight into it in a Spanish train station. There she met a man who introduced himself as a salesman. He was not a salesman. He was British intelligence searching for recruits. One conversation with Virginia convinced him she was exactly what they needed. Her cover would be journalism. Her true mission would be sabotage, espionage, and the building of underground resistance. She lost his number. Then war intensified. Her passage home collapsed. Stranded in London, she found the number in her coat pocket and dialed. That forgotten scrap of paper changed the course of the Second World War. If this already feels like the threshold of a remarkable story, stay with me. What Virginia does next will make the Gestapo's most feared hunters question everything they believed about who could shape the fate of a nation. Nicholas Boddington answered the phone with the calm assurance of a man who had been waiting for someone whose name he did not yet know. He invited Virginia to dinner. She walked in with her wooden leg, her quiet determination, and the unmistakable presence of someone who had endured more than most soldiers before ever stepping onto a battlefield. She was not trying to impress him. She simply existed with a natural gravity. Boddington listened as she spoke about Europe collapsing under fascism, about refugees wandering roads with no destination, about the fracture lines spreading across nations. And he saw immediately what British intelligence had been missing. They needed someone who could operate completely alone, someone civilians instinctively trusted, someone who could vanish in plain sight. And in that moment, he realized she was the answer to a question he had not known how to ask. The next morning, he stood at his desk in the Special Operations Executive, dictating a memo so urgent his secretary struggled to keep up. He recommended her for immediate recruitment into F Section, the branch responsible for sabotage and covert operations in France. She was fluent, disciplined, unassuming, and American. That last detail mattered. America was not yet in the war. An American woman could move where British agents instantly drew suspicion. She was a ghost before she even entered the field. Her training was a crash course in survival. She learned lock-picking, surveillance, the art of living without patterns, the psychology of interrogation, and the brutal truth that if she were captured, the Gestapo would not spare her because she was a woman. Her instructors made no attempt to soften reality. Capture meant torture. Torture meant execution. The wooden leg would be used against her, but she absorbed every lesson without complaint. She had already faced the worst moment of her life in a Turkish marsh. Nothing the Germans could do would eclipse that. Her cover identity was simple, but brilliant. She would be a foreign correspondent for the New York Post. The role gave her a believable reason to travel, to interview, to observe, and to linger without suspicion. Her articles would serve as both genuine journalism and coded messages that London could extract from between the lines. With nothing more than a forged passport, a few cyanide capsules, and a set of instructions that could vanish if she blinked too slowly, she boarded a train into Vichy France in September 1941. Her first steps in the unoccupied zone felt deceptively calm. German soldiers walked the streets. Vichy police collaborated openly. Most people survived by pretending not to see. But Virginia saw everything. She met the American ambassador who reminded her that the United States was still neutral and warned her that clandestine work could create political problems. She listened politely, then ignored him completely, because neutrality was a luxury built on denial, and she had already seen what Hitler's regime was capable of. Within weeks, she moved to Lyon, a decision that placed her in the same city as one of the most feared men in the Third Reich. Klaus Barbie, the SS officer later known as the Butcher of Lyon. Beneath the city, he oversaw interrogation rooms where prisoners entered alive and often never emerged. And it was in this exact landscape of terror that Virginia Hall chose to build her first resistance network. She rented a room in a convent. The 6:30 curfew was suffocating for spy work, but she adapted. The nuns, without knowing the full truth, offered her quiet protection. Soon, she moved to the Grand Nouvelle Hotel, a place buzzing with the footsteps of collaborators, informants, and fugitives. Her hotel room became the nerve center of a growing network of men and women who believed France was worth saving. She approached people the same way she had learned to navigate the marshes that cost her a leg, slow and careful, and she recruited doctors, bakers, priests, smugglers, prostitutes, railway workers, and bureaucrats. Each of them knew only a small piece of her plan. Only she held the full blueprint. She used her journalistic credentials to move freely, her notebook filled with far more than interviews. She tracked German troop movements, supply routes, airfields, and collaborators who whispered too eagerly. She arranged shelter for Allied airmen. She guided fugitives toward the mountains. And with the help of the American Vice Consul George Whittinghill, she smuggled reports to London inside diplomatic mailbags that no German officer dared to open. Within months, her network covered the city like a nervous system, quietly gathering intelligence and waiting for orders. But France was a house built on thin ice. Danger moved underground. Informants formed their own webs, and the greatest trap was about to snap shut. It would become known as the Marseille Mousetrap, and it would silence almost every SOE agent in southern France. The invitation to the meeting arrived like a lifeline, a safe house, a gathering of resistance leaders, a chance to coordinate, to strengthen, to unify. Many agents accepted, but Virginia felt something was wrong. Instinct, the kind forged through pain and repetition, told her to stay away. She did not attend. And in that single decision, she saved herself from a disaster that nearly erased the SOE's presence in France. The safe house was compromised. Agents walked straight into the arms of the Vichy police. Radios were seized, codes confiscated, identities revealed, torture chambers filled. In one day, southern France went dark. One by one, the lights of the resistance were extinguished. And when the smoke cleared, Virginia Hall was one of the only SOE officers still free. She was now the center of the Gestapo's storm, a ghost guiding refugees and agents through shadows that were closing in around her. And as she watched her allies vanish into prisons and camps, she made a decision that would define her legacy. She would not run. She would rebuild. But rebuilding required something more dangerous than courage. It required a rescue. Because the captured agents had been moved to a fortress-like prison called Mauzac. And if she could not free them, the entire resistance network in France would die. This is where the story shifts into the impossible. Because what she does next is not just bravery. It is the kind of operation intelligence services still study today. And it begins with a woman named Gaby Bloch and a prison camp guarded by men who had no idea they were about to be manipulated by a woman with a wooden leg and a network they could not see. The story turns sharper and darker the moment Mauzac enters the picture. It was not a death camp, but it was a place designed to break men slowly. Barbed wire layered the perimeter like a warning carved into the earth. Watchtowers stood over the yard with the cold patience of predators. Inside the barracks, the air tasted like fear, and every footstep echoed with the knowledge that time was running out. Mauzac was the kind of place where hope withered every day that passed. And Virginia Hall understood this better than anyone. If those men stayed there, if they cracked under interrogation, the entire SOE network she had built would collapse, and she would be exposed. Saving them was not optional. It was survival. Her first lifeline came through Gaby Bloch, the wife of one of the imprisoned agents. Gaby had been released by Vichy police, shaken but determined. Virginia met her in a dim corner of Lyon and recognized immediately that she held something more valuable than weapons or coded messages. She held access. Gaby could walk through the gates of Mauzac to visit her husband. She could see guard patterns. She could study routines. She could carry messages. And she could move without drawing suspicion. Virginia placed her trust in her, knowing that one mistake inside the camp would cost them everything. Meanwhile, inside the prison walls, the captured agents began working with the same quiet precision Virginia had taught them. They played games of boules in the yard, but every throw and every step measured distance to the fence. They counted the seconds between guard rotations. They studied shadows cast by the watchtowers. They mapped blind spots with the patience of men who knew their lives depended on it. Virginia began sending supplies through Gaby. She hollowed out books to hide tools. Sardine tins carried flattened pieces of metal that could be turned into blades or keys. A jam jar concealed a small file. The men transformed their barracks into a workshop, working as quietly as ghosts. They softened bread into a mold for the barracks lock and began hammering metal into shape, while others sang loudly to mask the sound. Their first attempt failed. The key did not turn. Days slipped away. Tension became a living thing in the room with them. But Virginia refused to let despair settle. She pushed harder, gathering more supplies, shaping more contacts, threading more lines of escape through a country thick with informants. The camp needed a break in routine, a moment when the guards lost focus. Gaby returned again and again, building relationships carefully. Her breakthrough came in the form of a guard named José Sevilla. He liked conversation. He liked wine. And he liked being told that the Allies remembered those who helped them. Slowly, quietly, he began to smooth the path for the escape. He convinced the camp commander that the watchtower near the barracks was unstable at night. He ensured certain officers were elsewhere when needed, and he promised to light a cigarette in the tower as the signal for the men to move. The night chosen for the escape was suffocatingly quiet. The prisoners waited in the dark like shadows who had learned to breathe without sound. but the guard who was supposed to give the signal never showed up. Minutes passed. Hours drifted by. The tension was unbearable. One wrong footstep could alert the wrong man. One nervous guard could ruin everything. Virginia waited miles away, her heart caught in the uncertainty. Gabby listened from her small hotel room in a nearby village, unable to help and unable to sleep. The SOE in London waited with dread, knowing they had committed every remaining asset to this moment. Then Sevilla made a choice that would not just change history, but save 12 men from execution. He climbed the watchtower himself, alone, silent. 3 a.m, with a cold wind cutting against his face, he lit his pipe. A small glow in the darkness, a tiny spark. But to the prisoners it was a beacon. Move now. The key turned. The door opened. One by one the men slipped out, following a rope stretched from the barracks to the fence. They moved quietly, every sound magnified by fear. At one point, a guard approached. The prisoners froze as their hearts hammered in the dark. The guard saw them, paused, and whispered for them to be more quiet. Then he walked away. He was one of Sevilla's chosen allies. Within 12 minutes, every man had slipped under the fence and into the night. They met the getaway driver Virginia had arranged and were driven to a safe house stocked with supplies, exactly as she had planned. By sunrise, the men were gone. The next morning, the guards discovered the barracks empty. Shock turned to rage. Raids erupted across the region. Doors were kicked open. Men were dragged out. Entire villages were interrogated. But Virginia had already spread rumors that the escapees had been flown out by the Royal Air Force. The lie worked. The trail went cold. Every prisoner reached Lyon. Every prisoner was divided between safe houses. And within weeks, every prisoner made it to London. The Mauzac escape became legend inside the SOE. It was spoken of in the kind of quiet tone reserved for miracles and impossible victories. And at the heart of it stood a woman with a wooden leg, a smile the Gestapo never saw coming, and a network that refused to break. But resistance victories never come without consequences. The Germans had lost face. Klaus Barbie was furious. Interrogators were humiliated. And the Gestapo reached a chilling conclusion. They were not fighting a group. They were fighting a mastermind. And that mastermind was a woman. The hunt now had a name. The Limping Lady. From that moment, Lyon became a trap. Checkpoints increased. Raids intensified. Informants were paid well for even the smallest fragment of information. And the Abwehr sent in someone far more dangerous than the men she had faced before. His name was Robert Alesch. He wore the robes of a priest. He carried the gentle voice of a man of faith. But he was a blade hidden in a velvet case. He infiltrated her network with compliments and charm. He fed information to Berlin with precision. He could never find her exact location, but he found enough to dismantle secondary cells. Agents vanished. Safe houses fell. Operations collapsed. And slowly the walls around Virginia tightened. Then Berlin made a decision that sealed her fate. In response to unrest and sabotage across France, Hitler ordered the full occupation of the Vichy zone. Germany rolled tanks into the so-called Free Zone. Lyon was now under direct Nazi control. Every street, every station, every corridor. The noose was closing. And yet even then, even under the weight of the Butcher of Lyon and an Abwehr mole poisoning her network, Virginia might have stayed. She might have kept fighting in the shadows. But an informant whispered a message that changed everything. The Germans were minutes away from raiding the block where she lived. They were preparing to seal the city. They had narrowed the search to a woman with a limp disguised as a journalist. They were not guessing anymore. They were hunting. She left Lyon within hours. She boarded the last train out before the Wehrmacht shut down the station. She sat silently between families fleeing the occupation, every bump of the train a painful reminder that her escape had just begun. Her only path out of France was through the Pyrenees. 50 miles of snow, cliffs, ice and ruthless cold. A brutal journey for a perfectly healthy body. Nearly impossible for a woman with a heavy wooden leg that rubbed her stump raw. She hired a guide known for abandoning clients who slowed him down. She climbed for 3 days. Her leg bled through her clothing. Her hands froze. She moved in silence, one agonizing step at a time. She transmitted a single message to the SOE while crossing, complaining that Cuthbert was being troublesome. The operator on the other end thought Cuthbert was a fellow agent and responded that they should consider eliminating him. She laughed in spite of the pain. When she reached Spain, half frozen and limping heavily, she was immediately arrested for illegal entry. The American embassy intervened and negotiated her release. She had survived. But the chapter of her life that had reshaped the French resistance was now behind her. Back in London, she was furious to be kept off the field. The SOE insisted she was too well known, too recognizable, too hunted. Eventually, she transferred to the new American intelligence service, the OSS, and they sent her back into France disguised as an elderly peasant woman. Gray hair, wrinkled skin, stooped posture, a cane to disguise her limp. It was perfect. She returned to occupied territory with a vengeance. She transmitted 37 intelligence reports in 8 weeks. She organized 27 parachute drops. She mobilized 1,500 resistance fighters. Her operations crippled German supply lines and derailed their defense of southern France. Her fighters killed more than 170 German soldiers and captured 800 more. She coordinated sabotage that shook the Nazi hold on the region just months before the Allied invasion. When the war ended, President Truman offered her a public ceremony. She declined. She feared exposure would compromise her remaining contacts. She wanted her work to stay in the shadows. She joined the CIA in 1947 and continued fighting Soviet influence through the early years of the Cold War. She retired quietly and spent the rest of her life on a farm in Maryland until her death in 1982. She never told her story publicly. She never asked for recognition. She left that up to history. When my father wrote about her in his diary, he wrote something that still sits with me. He said her legacy is not that she crossed frozen mountains on a wooden leg. It is not that she built resistance networks that terrified the Gestapo. It is not even that she outran the butcher of Lyon. It is that she chose to stand alone in the darkest places so others would not have to. That is the truth behind the Limping Lady. A woman who changed the course of a war without ever asking for her name to be remembered. A woman who made courage look quiet. A woman who carried one wooden leg and enough resolve to shake an empire. If you found this story powerful, meaningful, or worth preserving, subscribe and like this video. You help keep these forgotten histories alive. And write in the comments, God bless America, to honor the men and women who held the line when the world needed them most.